A wealthy father took his young daughter to breakfast at a local diner. When the waitress approached their table, he froze in complete shock. It was his ex-wife, the woman who'd left him and their daughter 3 years ago for a richer man. The Sunday morning sun streamed through the windows of Maple Street Diner, casting warm light across red vinyl booths and a counter lined with chrome stools that had witnessed decades of breakfast conversations and coffee refills. The smell of bacon and fresh pancakes mixed with the constant hum of quiet chatter, creating the comfortable atmosphere of a place where regulars knew the menu by heart and strangers felt welcome within minutes. At a corner booth sat Daniel Carter with his 7-year-old daughter Emma, both studying laminated menus, even though Emma always ordered the same chocolate chip pancakes she'd been getting since she was old enough to sit in a booster seat. This was their Sunday morning tradition, father-daughter time before the week's chaos began, a routine that had become sacred after Emma's mother left them 3 years earlier. Neither of them expected that this ordinary morning would become the moment when past and present collided in ways that would force everyone involved to confront choices made and consequences faced. Before this story takes you into what happened in that diner, pause for just a moment. If you believe in karma that teaches without cruelty, in dignity that speaks louder than revenge, and in the way life has a way of humbling those who chase the wrong things, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to remember that character matters more than cash, and subscribe to Untold Kindness Journey. Your support helps us tell stories that prove what you choose says more about you than what you have. And sometimes the universe delivers lessons exactly when people need them most. Daniel had built his construction company from nothing, working brutal hours and taking risks that terrified him, but paid off gradually over 15 years. At 42, he was comfortable, not wealthy but stable, able to provide a good life for his family without luxury but without struggle. 3 years ago, his wife Jessica had decided comfortable wasn't enough, had met someone at a charity event who drove a Bentley and owned vacation homes in 3 countries, had announced she was leaving Daniel for a man who could give her the lifestyle she deserved. The divorce had been ugly, Jessica fighting for half of everything Daniel had built, while showing minimal interest in custody of their 4-year-old daughter, ultimately settling for weekend visits she rarely kept and child support she spent on herself rather than Emma. Emma had been devastated by her mother's abandonment. Too young to understand why Mommy had chosen money over her, spending the first year asking when Mommy was coming home, until she finally stopped asking and started pretending it didn't hurt. Daniel had stepped into single fatherhood with determination born of love and fury. Becoming both parents, learning to braid hair through YouTube tutorials, attending every school event, building a life where Emma felt secure even though her mother had proven unreliable. He dated occasionally, but nothing serious, his priority being Emma's stability, making sure she knew at least one parent would always choose her first. The diner door chimed as their waitress approached, and Daniel looked up with a polite smile, ready to order Emma's usual pancakes. The smile froze on his face, his body going rigid with recognition, because the woman wearing a worn brown uniform with a white apron and carrying a coffee pot was Jessica, his ex-wife, the woman who'd left him for a mansion and a man with a private jet. His first instinct was to grab Emma and leave immediately, to avoid the awkward confrontation, but Emma had already seen her, her small voice breaking with confusion and hope. "Mommy, is that you?" Jessica's face went pale, the coffee pot trembling in her hands as she recognized her ex-husband and the daughter she hadn't seen in over a year, having stopped making even the pretense of weekend visits after her new marriage consumed her attention. For a moment nobody spoke, the diner continuing its breakfast bustle around them, while their table existed in frozen shock. Daniel's mind raced with questions and assumptions, seeing his ex-wife in a waitress uniform at a modest diner, knowing she was supposed to be living in luxury with her wealthy husband, understanding immediately that something had gone very wrong with the life she'd chosen over their family. Jessica set down the coffee pot with shaking hands, her voice barely audible. "Daniel, Emma, I didn't know you came here. I can get another server if this is too uncomfortable." But Emma had already slid out of the booth and wrapped her arms around her mother's waist, 7 years old and incapable of holding grudges the way adults did. Just a little girl hugging her mommy, and not caring about the years of abandonment, because children forgive what they shouldn't have to forgive. Jessica's eyes filled with tears, her hands hovering over Emma's head before finally, gently, returning the embrace with a tenderness Daniel hadn't seen from her in years. Daniel's voice came out harder than he intended. "What happened, Jessica? Where's your wealthy husband? Where's the lifestyle you left us for?" Jessica's face crumpled with shame as she gently released Emma and gestured for them to sit. "Can I bring your order first? Then maybe we can talk." Her professional mask was cracking, vulnerability showing through in ways that made Daniel's anger deflate slightly, because whatever had happened, she was clearly paying for her choices. He nodded, ordered Emma's pancakes and his usual omelette, and watched Jessica walk away with shoulders that carried visible weight. Her uniform hanging on a frame that had lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. When Jessica returned with their food, she slid into the booth beside Emma during a slow moment, her manager giving her a sympathetic nod from behind the counter, suggesting this wasn't the first time personal drama had played out during her shifts. Her story came out in quiet, broken pieces, while Emma ate her pancakes, and Daniel listened with conflicting emotions warring in his chest. The wealthy man had been charming during their courtship, but controlling once they married, treating Jessica like an acquisition rather than a partner, monitoring her spending, isolating her from friends, making her existence contingent on pleasing him, and looking perfect beside him at events where she was decoration rather than person. When she'd gained weight from stress and unhappiness, he'd made cruel comments about her appearance. When she'd suggested getting a job to have purpose beyond being his wife, he'd laughed and told her that women in his circle didn't work. They looked beautiful and didn't embarrass him. The marriage had been a gilded cage that turned genuinely abusive, emotional and eventually physical, until Jessica finally found courage to leave after 18 months of misery. But leaving meant leaving with nothing, because the prenup she'd signed protected all his assets, meant starting over with no recent work history, no references, no resources, because she'd given up everything for a lifestyle that had proven hollow. She'd been working at Maple Street Diner for 8 months, living in a studio apartment, rebuilding from zero, too ashamed to reach out to Daniel or Emma because she'd burned that bridge so completely she assumed it was irreparable. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," Jessica said quietly, her eyes on Emma, who was listening with a child's incomplete understanding. "I chose wrong. I chose money over family, status over love, and I paid for it every day of that marriage. I lost you both because I was shallow and stupid and convinced that wealth equaled happiness. I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know I'm sorry. So deeply sorry." Daniel sat with emotions too complex to name, anger at her abandonment mixing with pity for her fall, satisfaction at karma delivered mixing with discomfort at taking pleasure in her suffering. Emma's small voice cut through his internal conflict. "Mommy, why didn't you visit me? I missed you." Jessica's tears fell freely now. "I was ashamed, baby. I made such bad choices, and I didn't know how to face what I'd done. But missing you has been the worst part of everything. Worse than the bad. Marriage? Worse than losing money, worse than starting over. I lost my daughter because I was a fool." Daniel made a decision in that moment, not born from residual love or desire to reconcile romantically, but from recognition that Emma needed her mother and that Jessica had been punished enough by natural consequences without him adding cruelty to lessons already learned. "When's your shift end?" he asked. Jessica looked confused. 4 o'clock, why? "Because Emma deserves to spend time with her mother, and you deserve a chance to rebuild that relationship if you can prove you're serious this time. We're not getting back together. That ship sailed and sank. But Emma needs both parents if both parents are willing to actually be parents. Can you do that?" Jessica nodded, more tears falling, gratitude and shame mixing visibly on her face. "I can. I will. I know I have to earn back trust. I know actions matter more than words. But yes, I want to be Emma's mother again if you'll let me try." Daniel established boundaries immediately, practical and protective of Emma's emotional safety, while giving Jessica opportunity to prove herself. Supervised visits at first, regular. Schedule she had to keep. Therapy for Emma to process everything, and absolute zero tolerance for flaking or putting her own needs above their daughter's again. Jessica agreed to everything without hesitation, understanding she was getting far more grace than she deserved. Over the following months, Jessica showed up consistently, keeping every scheduled visit, being present in ways she'd never been before. Her fall, proving through actions rather than promises that she'd learned what mattered. She remained working at the diner, living modestly, focused on rebuilding relationship with Emma rather than rebuilding wealth or status. She attended Emma's school events, helped with homework during visits, became the mother she should have been all along, motivated by love rather than obligation. Daniel watched carefully, protective and skeptical, but gradually acknowledging that Jessica's humbling had genuinely changed her priorities. Emma blossomed, having her mother back in her life, the hole that had existed since age 4 finally beginning to fill with regular presence and genuine affection. Daniel never reconciled romantically with Jessica. That bridge truly burned beyond repair. But they built something better, a functional co-parenting relationship based on Emma's needs rather than their history. Jessica eventually moved into better housing and advanced at the diner to management, but she never returned to chasing wealth or status, having learned that comfort earned through honest work felt better than luxury purchased by selling your soul. Years later, when Emma was older and could understand the full story, Jessica told her the truth about her choices and consequences without making excuses, teaching her daughter lessons about values and priorities that came from lived experience rather than empty advice. And Daniel, watching his ex-wife show up consistently for their daughter year after year, recognized that sometimes people need to lose everything to find what actually matters, that second chances aren't about forgetting past harm, but acknowledging genuine growth, and that the best revenge isn't making someone suffer, but allowing them opportunity to become better while you move forward with grace.